our president, President Brenda Modgill, who could not be here. I welcome you to this event again today. May I also recognize our provost, Dr. Maria Vaz. And before I give the podium to John, I just want to mention one thing. Beginning next year, we are going to have a faculty assigned to us from Central Intelligence Agency, CIA. And this person is going to assist us in developing courses in cybersecurity. So we are going to be probably the only university which will have that CIA executive in residence. So we keep you fully informed. Beginning next fall, that person is going to be here. Thank you very much, John.
Morning, everyone. How are you today? So this is our last session of the year and on cybersecurity. I know most of you who have been here to other sessions, this is the most exciting part where I introduce all the speakers. I'm going to disappoint you today. Raj is going to introduce himself, and then each of the speakers is going to go through and give you a little background on themselves as well. So welcome. I hope you enjoy the session. We are going to do a live hack near the end of the session, so hopefully you'll stay for that. And Raj?
Thank you, John. So before I introduce, what we'll do today is I'll introduce and give a couple thoughts on cybersecurity, and then we'll go through each of the panel members, and they'll introduce themselves and then give a couple thoughts on cybersecurity. We'll talk about some of the issues and challenges in the not-for-profit industry, and then we'll talk about some of the quick solutions you could implement even today when you go back. Instead of focusing on the bigger issues, let's focus on the quick hit items. So again, my name is Raj Patel. Again, thank you for having me here. I lead Plant Moran's cybersecurity consulting practice, and we have a local team that goes and helps clients manage their cybersecurity. We do more of the assessment compliance to maintain independence. We don't do any implementation or selling any products. And I actually have some of my partners in crime here too, and the young guys will do the hacking demo later. They're more smarter than we are when it comes to that. So a couple of my thoughts. So one of the things is when I look at cybersecurity and the problems, one is we are naive, and two is we ignore it, we don't do anything about it. So I'll talk about the ignoring part. To me, it's the same as we have all these school shootings, and I go to my kid's school and nothing's changed. I went last week and nothing changed from a month ago. And I think that's what's with cybersecurity. We hear these incidents all the time, but we don't do anything about it. We heard the Target incidents, and none of us go and change our passwords because it's not going to happen to us. You know, we hear an incident from a month ago, and we don't go back to our organization and say, well, what if this had happened to us? Are we exposed to it? And I think to me that's the biggest problem with cybersecurity. The reason we have all these issues is we continue to ignore the problem until it happens to us. So the second thing about naive, how many of you have an Amazon Prime account? Right, so all those, take your phones out and look for a Wi-Fi hotspot. Amazon just started a free Wi-Fi hotspot. Let me know if you get spotted. Got it? So, if you log in there, by the way, that is a remote Wi-Fi I just set up on my phone 2 minutes ago. If you see that, what would you think? Now I didn't go, I was just doing my phone, but if you had the right equipment, you could have put in a login page and you'd be logging through an Amazon account. And we would have passed you right through to the internet. You'd have no idea that we were got here and right information. So that's how simple it is. And all I did was I went to my phone and changed the name to Amazon free Wi-Fi. So I don't even need any technical skills to do what I just did. Now, what do you think the password is? Because that's the other thing that's so naive. Two sections, it's a word and numbers. It's something to do with Amazon.
Password?
No, it's something to do with Amazon.
Prime?
No.
Your word Amazon?
I mean, 1, 2, 3 got right before that. No. Getting close. That is so close, yeah. But you see how now, that's what hackers do. They figure out your passwords just by figuring out what, what we do is set passwords based on kids' names, so dog's name, or and then use our birthday. We're naive even we ignore it. So why don't I go over to Chris in the end. Chris, do you want to introduce yourself and give a few thoughts?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Chris Gordon. I work for Blue Rock Technologies. I'm a senior systems engineer there, where we basically provide IT services to both nonprofit and profit organizations. We typically seek to secure our clients' environments, stabilize them, get them in a better position. We also help with data breaches and helping them recover from those. I personally work on project implementation, mainly with the infrastructure. I implement new network server systems, secure them, new cloud system solutions. Basically, what I feel in regards to technology is we're constantly introducing new things, and all of those new things have new security concerns that come along with them. They're becoming more complex every single day. The statistics, obviously, you've all heard them. They are outrageous, to say the least, and we need to keep up with them. The failure to do so can result in loss of productivity and potentially business as well as financial resources. We all have our own specific roles really to fulfill with this, so trying to keep up can really be quite difficult, and I believe that leveraging outside resources that are qualified can certainly help us with that, so that we can focus on our day-to-day operations while the professionals focus on implementing the new technology, securing them, and maintaining them.
Jeff, do you want to go next?
Sure, of course. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jeff Evans. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the Detroit Zoological Society. And from my perspective, I'm in charge actually of finance and IT, although we have an IT staff of about 8 people, 6 that are full-time and 2 that are part-time. But my perspective is that my biggest concern, obviously, is not just our reputational risk if some data gets compromised from our customers, but also our data internally, just to have some of our information that could get compromised or damaged, our assets could be damaged. So my perspective is always looking at, what are we doing to make sure that we're covered from the perspective of making sure that your information when you come to the zoo is protected, your credit card information in particular. That's the most salient information that someone would be looking for as it relates to guests coming into the park. But also our internal data as well, because when you lose data, the recovery process is pretty onerous. And so those are the 2 big key components that I look at to help make sure that we are covered there. And as a finance person who's not a technology person, I am never comfortable that everything is okay. I have big reliance on our IT staff, of course, but not knowing the particular details of how IT works at a very, very granular level, I'm always a little bit uncomfortable. But things have gone well for us so far. We haven't had anything that's been a major breach or compromise or anything from our customers' perspective getting into the news, and that's great, and that's the overall goal.
Great. So I think Jeff mentioned one key thing is cybersecurity is about protecting your data. And that's really the core of what you're doing. You got to focus on protecting your data. You want to go next?
Yes. My name is Marco DeCaprio. I actually have two hats that I wear. I am president and founder of Versalta Technology Solutions, which we set up in full service to the Archdiocese of Detroit. So I'm essentially a staff aug CIO of the Archdiocese of Detroit. My title is adjunct to the moderator of the Curia for Technology. It's a mouthful, but basically I'm reporting to the COO of the Archdiocese of Detroit. I started about 4.5 years ago, and there was just a real need to strategically look at the technology in the Archdiocese, address concerns, both security, information, the tendency to have data silos where each department is doing their own thing and storing their data in their own database, their own location. So to the point of protecting data is essential. We also, one of the big challenges in cybersecurity is not just the technology, it's the people. And the attacks in terms of things like phishing is becoming more and more innovative and more creative. I even received an email the other day, not a personal email from somebody externally, where they were replying to an email I sent to them that was saying, "Oh, I have a document for you." And it was unusual, but I mean, they're getting more creative. They get into somebody's account, and it's not just spoofing somebody's email address, but they're getting into somebody's account, replying to an email I sent, trying to get me to click on a link, which will either lead me to potentially a form or open a virus. So there's a full industry around hacking and trying to get people's information to the point of directly identifying who's the CFO and how do I get them to release their information. We deal with this at the parish level, where pastor says, "I need you to send money right now to this account," and it's a spoof. So we're constantly having to find ways to train our people, and there's tools out there for training, because it's one to make sure you've got all the secure infrastructure in place, but that security is only as good as the people who are interacting with the information you have. So it's a constant challenge to stay on top of that. And to Chris's point, I'm not a cybersecurity expert. I know the risks. It's all about risk mitigation. The risks is never going to go away, and it's constantly increasing. So we have to figure out how do we mitigate.
Thanks, Marco. So Marco also mentioned something about users and training them. So your first line of defense is always your user. But that's your worst line of defense. Because today, it's the users that are, their bad habits is what is creating the issues with cybersecurity. So when we look at cybersecurity, the issues really correlate in three areas. One is somebody's going to steal your data. Somebody's going to lock your data so you cannot access it. And then thirdly, someone's going to kind of delete your data completely, or corrupt your data or change your data. So for example, at a university, I could go change my grades from a C to an A. And so those really are the three risks to the data. And there's four ways to get to that. So one is through the user itself. So the different ways a user can get impacted. So Marcos mentioned one of them was phishing. And so I could impersonate somebody, send someone a phishing email. They could click on it and give me access. The second one is around the passwords. There's a lot of weak passwords, and hackers can crack the passwords. So if you have a weak password, they will crack it and then be able to use it, so they're not even touching the user at this point. The third area really is in Chris's area, where you don't have the right technology to protect yourself. At home you might have a Wi-Fi cable, a Comcast, and it's not protected. You haven't changed the passwords that came for the setup, the admin password. Or you might not have at work, you might not have set up the right firewall, you just bought it, put it in, but you haven't checked it. And so that's the other way that hackers get to it, is because you don't have the right systems in place, or your systems are old, and they know what vulnerabilities exist with that. So Chris, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the issues that you've seen with your clients?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. A lot of the issues that I see with our clients are that they lack the resources necessary to fulfill the IT needs of the infrastructure and the organization. Basically, you have a bunch of security standards and procedures and policies, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're being followed or that they're even capable of being followed. A lot of our clients, they may have one or two people inside the organization that are wearing multiple hats. Marco knows very well about playing multiple roles, and it becomes very difficult to keep up with. One of those clients that we recently took on about 6 months ago, they had their COO basically managing their IT infrastructure, and though he knew a lot about it, there were some holes there, and to give an example, we came in and we started to basically change the servers, we virtualized them, put them on a bunch of new hardware, installed new network systems, a new SAN storage array, began securing all of that and implementing backups. And we were about 90% done, and then all of a sudden, one of the user's passwords had been cracked, and they became compromised and infected with ransomware. So thankfully, because the 90% of the infrastructure had already been changed, I could recover all of that within just a couple of minutes. However, a couple of the systems, they ended up taking a couple of days, which obviously caused the client to lose a lot of productivity in those times, as well as cost in trying to recover from those damages and clean everything up. I would say probably aside from lacking resources, really, I encounter the inconvenience factor in a lot of clients that we take on is they don't have good password policies put in place because it's an inconvenience to the user to change their password every 90 days, or they don't want to make complex passwords because it's difficult to remember because they have, you know, their Windows password to remember, they've got 5 to 10 different applications to remember, they've various websites. So I believe we can find simple solutions to those that involve technology, whether it's implementing single sign-on, password management, identity as a service, and those are some of the things that we try to implement for our clients to get those good policies into place and protect the data. And then to a point that you made earlier, old systems and applications, they haunt organizations. They find themselves stuck on old hardware that is very difficult to migrate to new hardware. The software is no longer supported, it's no longer patched, which obviously leaves their entire network vulnerable because you've got old Windows 2000 servers and XP machines that are, you know, very critical to the organization and they can't get rid of. So finding, I think, a good strategy for the long-term vision can help us to really avoid those pitfalls, and I believe that requires, you know, someone to manage the IT infrastructure and someone who has a whole picture in mind that meets the visions of the organization and can avoid, you know, making sporadic decisions for application choices and begin to standardize all of that.
Yeah, so Chris mentioned 3 different things. So one of them I want to zoom in on what he said first was, who is managing in IT? And so if you're taking notes, I want you to write 2 questions. So when you go back to your organization, who is leading or who is managing your IT infrastructure? Is it Jeff? Or is it Marco? Or is it Chris? Because it's one of the 3. It's either somebody in management, CFO, CIO, it's somebody in IT, like Marcos, or it's a vendor. Now, then you've got to decide who is most qualified to lead your IT. Would you ever have your CIO, IT director, be head of accounting? Nope. So Jeff probably wouldn't qualify to do the backups every night.
Nor would I want to, actually.
No, I want to, yeah. Chris might, and Marco definitely would. But the second question, more importantly, and we see that across all of our not-for-profit clients, or even some of the higher, is who is responsible for cybersecurity at your organization? And we always find that, you know, one, you might not have a dedicated resource that focuses on cyber, or if you have somebody designated, it's part of the other role. It's not even the core of what they do. They might be doing something else and they're responsible for cyber. And then the third question is, are they qualified for that role? So that's something I would go back and ask you on it. Who leads cybersecurity? Is that their primary function? And is that what they do? I mean, are they qualified for it? Do they have the right certification? Now, most of your organizations, you probably might not need a full-time cybersecurity resource, so then you got to figure out what's the best path. If you want somebody internally, so like Mark, in your case, you might have somebody that's got cybersecurity and might be also an infrastructure, and those go hand in hand. But if you're doing that, you got to make sure that have you allocated the right amount of time? So not spending 10% time on cybersecurity and 90% on infrastructure. And secondly, are they going for the right training in that area? If you go to a vendor like Chris, you want to ask them, who is our dedicated cybersecurity resource? Because it's going to be different than the engineer. So Chris is the engineer, but they probably have somebody that handles the cybersecurity side. The second item, Chris, you mentioned was around getting the right infrastructure. And I think that's something that we see a lot, is that the older systems, they're not right. They're patched in by maybe you had a new accounting system and they came in and put everything together. So I think it's important to assess your technology today, especially. Because you might have some rogue systems out there, you might have some old systems out there that would impact it. Marco, you talked a little bit about phishing.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk more about your
Well,
experience?
yeah, I can. I mean, that's a key risk that we deal with. You know, we've been looking more and more to do outsourced managed services, because to really bring in cybersecurity experts aren't cheap. It's an important role, and you have to appreciate it. But
Actually, a bottle of wine will do it for me.
they're costly. So, you know, when we select an application now, in the past, the traditional mode was to have, you know, set up all your servers on site and install your applications and manage that with a team on site. More and more, and Chris mentioned like identity management as a service, there's entire industries built now providing these solutions in the cloud that their livelihood depends on that security being solid. If you've got an identity management provider that's cloud hosted, and you know there's risk in that as well, but you have to look at, am I going to be more solid with a team that's being paid nonprofit rates for technology versus a shared services model that can protect my assets. So that's one thing we're looking at. We're also looking at the training piece. So on the phishing, there's some great tools out there, you know, and I'm not paid for any of these things, but we're using this product called KnowBefore, which again, it's a cloud-based solution. It ties in with our identity management, so it's a single sign-on application, and it's set up to run training to our staff on an annual basis, and it refreshes the training on what to look out for in an email that clues you in that this is a phishing email. Don't click on the link. Think before you click. And on top of that, it also then does simulated phishing attacks. You can actually set up commonly used phishing attacks and send them out to your staff, and after they've had the training, and see what kind of response you get. And if someone's still not quite getting that, you got to go back and do some additional training. But you'd rather than make the mistake on a fake phishing email than a real one. So there's tools like that we've been introducing and rolling out, and they're pretty reasonably priced based on a number of users in the organization to roll those out.
We use KnowBefore as well, and we do a quarterly test to our employees to see who passes and who fails, and then we do follow-up training. But we also do training twice a year as well throughout the year, and we send out reminders about changing your password. We actually force people to change their password every 90 days. You don't have an option there. So small little simple things like that to sort of keep the environment healthy, from a hygiene perspective, will go a long way to help mitigate some of these risks of people getting into your system.
Mm-hmm. So I think phishing is very important. It's still the #1 cause of cyber incidents when somebody clicks a link and then the organization's affected. And everyone gets, even at Plant Moran, we get phishing attacks. We get emails. Like a couple years ago around tax time, we got an email with attachments, and you think it's tax related. To me, there's two sides to the phishing. And Jeff and Marcus talked about what they do from an organizational level. But what would you do as an individual? You get an email. So what do you look for in the email? Because it's going to look legitimate. Sorry, what was that? Logos. So he would look at logos. You know, are the logos right? I mean, they could be copied too. And to me, there's 4 things you look. Go ahead. URL. The URL. So if there's a link, you hover over the link and see what the real URL is. So what else? So sender email address. So you see the email address is from me, But when you hover over my name, it's really somebody else and not me. So that's important if you find a suspicious email to look at over the email address. What else?
Basically, anything that asks for personal information, don't big organizations rarely ever ask for personal information.
Right. So if it's asking you for your personal information, asking you to log in. So if you get an email from Amazon Prime saying you need to reset your password, click here, you don't want to click there. What you want to do is go directly to your Amazon page and then log in to see if you get a message. Or you can call their help desk and say, is this a legitimate? Same thing with your bank account. If you click here for your monthly statement, don't click the link. Just go to your regular site, log in, and then see your statement that way. Yep, good points. What else? Anybody in the back? Yes?
The practice of not opening it, is that safe enough?
No, that is,
I never open attachment.
right, so, yeah, that'd be nice if you didn't answer. No, but that's a good point you make, because attachment is where some of the issues are. So PDF documents, Excel documents, Word documents, they could have macros in there or code in there that's malicious. And so the good thing nowadays is there's a number, before the email comes to you, the IT systems are already checking on that email. So if you don't have email filtering scam software, talk to your IT vendor, because that is important, because that's your first block. So that email shouldn't even get to you. That system should look at that email, look at the signatures in it, look at if there's any data in it, what kind of data it is, and let you know that. But if it does get to you, what do you do? One thing, obviously, is if you find it suspicious, and there will be other signs in the email that this is suspicious, you can call whoever sent you that email. Say, hey, did you send me this attachment? And that is true, like if you're a controller or CFO and you get an email with an invoice to pay something, don't open that and find a better way. Tell that person better way. Maybe there's an online portal they could save the attachments. But that is one way, and it's very, you're going through emails fast, and it's very easy to click on that PDF document. Yes? Yep. Exactly. So you have your Facebook account and LinkedIn account. I can easily find out who you know from LinkedIn, and I know what the email scheme is, and so I could, exactly. Yep. So that's another good point. Yep. So one thing I do just on these attachments, emails, and I think I can do it for another maybe year or not more, is I'll actually open it on my phone, Apple phone, because whatever is in the bad stuff is really more from a Microsoft. But I think my days are getting numbered a little bit with that. The other thing I also do and my plant brand friends back, they will appreciate this, is I don't open that for a day, because I know John Bibis will open it right away, and then the system will go down and I'll know that was a bad email. So sometimes it's better to wait and see who else will open it. Jeff, let's talk a little bit about data, because I think that's very important. And I'm going to kick it off. I don't know if you know the answer to this or not, but the biggest issue with data in most organizations is they don't know where their data is or what data they have. So I'll kick it off and talk a little bit about data and how you protect data.
It's a big, broad question there, Raj.
You can go wherever.
We have data kind of all over the place. We have data that obviously in our accounting and financial records is the core of a lot of our data. We have donor information and a database there that's an area that we really particularly want to make sure is protected. We have data as well. When people walk through the park, we're capturing data when you use your Visa card. And so we have data applications in various parts of the organization. And so because of that, it's really, really important and critical that we have a plan for making sure that those areas are secure. And so we use outside vendors to augment our staff, even though our staff is a fairly robust staff in terms of size and experience. We're not the expert in everything, and so we go outside where necessary to make sure that we augment, where we are to help make sure that we're capturing the latest and greatest tools available to us, given our financial constraints, because we all, in the nonprofit, we all have constraints of some kind, to help make sure that we're doing risk mitigation in that area. So just at a broad level, I think about it in those terms, and sort of our IT group always comes up with ideas that we can sort of think about and plan for, and sometimes we can finance it, and sometimes we have to sort of defer and wait. But certainly data is a huge, huge concern for the organization, because that's the heart and soul of where thieves like to get to. Either use it for their own benefit or just encrypt it or sort of damage it, because actually, I'm not sure why people just want to hack data and just destroy it. I mean, I understand a thief wanting to get your information and use it, but people who just want to destroy information just for the fun of it is just, I don't really get that. But they're out there, and you have to protect to make sure that you mitigate that happening in your organization.
Students are looking for data.
That you can do it, yeah, just for fun, just for sport,
Yeah.
sure.
But one thing around the data, so hackers can lock your data from a ransomware, and you pay them $50,000, they release your data.
Yeah.
And that happens in personal lives too, where they will call you at home and say, we're calling from Microsoft, and they have you download information, and then they take control of your computer. So also be careful of that. But I think the important thing about data is we're collecting data. No matter what organization you are, you're collecting, a lot of organizations collect credit cards, so the university collects credit cards, a lot of not-for-profit collects credit cards, and it's important to protect that. And maybe I've got a few things to talk about, but Jeff, you want to talk about it at the Archdiocese, some of your data protection?
Yeah, Marco, sorry.
Marcos, I'm sorry.
Well,
Yeah, no.
I just want to add before you go there, is that we actually don't keep credit card information. We use it, and it's gone and flushed at the end of the day. So we don't try to house it, keep it, because that would be a bad practice, obviously. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Great point. And that's part of PCI compliance. PCI compliance is a process making sure anything related to credit card data is properly secured. And we're relying more and more on third-party applications that get PCI certified. In the rare cases where we do collect it, there are very strict policies around making sure any credit card data is locked or destroyed once processed. So that's a key piece of protection for us. The other was PII, personally identifiable information. So making sure we have 60 schools in addition to 220 parishes. The diocese is interesting because it operates more like a franchise model than a traditional corporate model. So each parish does their own thing, and the challenge is making sure the people in the parishes understand the responsibility they have to protect the information of their parishioners. So we have, part of that is making sure we're trying to use the same systems, aligning to platforms that we can manage out of the center, and ensure that the data is secure. Again, the more we're relying on third-party tools, I'm essentially offloading the risk on the vendor to provide those securities. And the important part there is validating that the vendors themselves have the procedures and policies in place and commitment to security of that information as well. So that's really important.
So the organization has policies in place, but should individual people who are involved with data, should they encrypt it?
I guess it depends on what the data is. But yes, I mean, encrypt.
General practice, whatever the data.
Mm-hmm.
It's very expensive to encrypt everything. And so I think where Marcus was going was it depends what you're protecting. And
part of it is,
Talking pretty sensitive data, so
yeah, if it's sensitive data, you want to encrypt it. I've come across situations where people were putting social security numbers in plain text in a database. Never do that.
password protected zip, is that appropriate, or do you go deeper?
Again, it kind of depends on what it is. But wherever you have any type of personal identifiable information, that needs to be protected. When you get into like anything with credit card numbers or social security numbers that that is essential data, that definitely should be encrypted. And for a nonprofit, I would avoid putting that on any system that you maintain. that was, that's something is a general, just avoid it.
User concern. Jeffrey just said that any credit card data they get, they destroy that. Is that a common practice when I use it for a restaurant and so on? Does someone actually, it's different people doing differently, or is there a common thing that after they get their money transferred to their account, we are all supposed to destroy the information from the card?
So what we've seen is, it depends by organization. The best ones will not even collect it, use a third-party processor that takes the data and then approves. Others will, like I said, destroy it at the end of the day. The zoo probably needs it because there's a refund situation, so they've got to keep it for a day, but they destroy it. There is no good reason for the zoo or the archdiocese to keep that credit card information beyond a certain period. Maybe it's a day, maybe it's a week, but not everyone does that. Like Marcos mentioned, some of the parishes might not do it.
Yeah, parishes rarely work with credit cards. The only thing they do is they set up their EFT for automatic,
Right.
giving. But that's or it's an online system that they've contracted and they set that up, and the person can set up with the online giving platform.
Right. And what we've seen is when we're talking about where is my data, so a lot of times you find if you go to an organization, they have a good system to collect credit card data, store it securely, and process it securely. But what we end up finding is these other Excel files, other files where credit card information or health information is stored. So we've been once where it was a marketing spreadsheet, and they had all kinds of information from it, and that was from 6 years ago. That should have been deleted within 3 months of that project being over. Or we'll find, in HR that they have a file on employees' medical records, and it's just sitting there that you can find it on their network. So that's where, from our end, when we test systems, we find the data is in unsecure locations. Before I just go, so even at your homes today, how many of you have a computer at home? Right? So your computer at home has your tax returns, maybe your loan documents. How secure is that computer? It's probably turned on right now and your Wi-Fi is on at home.
Mine is not working.
It's not working. That's a good defense. So you don't have access to your data too. But one of the things you could do is take that data off that computer. For $100 you can get an encrypted hard drive. Buy 2 of them. Put that stuff on that hard drive and put that in your safe. I mean, how often do you need your tax return? Maybe 2-3 times a year. When you need it, you can plug it in and access the data and pull that out again. And that goes in the thing of, are you encrypting? You're not encrypting your whole hard drive, just pulling that data out. And that way, if your computer is not working, you still have a copy, and you can load it up. And same thing with your photos that you have. Not only want to steal those photos, but if you lose those photos, you won't have photos of your kids. You had a question or comment?
Those are all great questions, and I think I'd be concerned about the Wi-Fi in a parish, just because I don't know how secure that is. If you're using applications that leverage the internet to process credit cards, those should all be encrypted transactions, and yeah, you would expect that if they're doing that, you want to make sure it's a reputable company that's encrypting it. Again, if it's a known company and they've been doing business and they're gonna have the requirements in place to make sure those are encrypted. I don't know if you can speak more to that, Raj, but.
No, I agree with him. I mean, go with a reputable company, do your due diligence. Don't, things like that, don't try to do it yourself. It's not your core business. But when you talk a little bit about you go somewhere and you're using their Wi-Fi, I was recently in a client not-for-profit foundation in town, and the president was talking about going to Uganda on a trip. And I said, so what are you doing with Wi-Fi? Oh, I just use the hotel Wi-Fi. I said, well, why don't you take your own hotspot with you from here? Then you know it's yours. And interestingly, the CFO was in the meeting. She says, do you know we get those for free without a contract? So there was no cost. And so same thing, if you're traveling and you're worried about Wi-Fi, hotel, or whatever, just take your own hotspot. Or your phone hotspot you can use too.
What do you send your auditors out with when they go to clients?
He's got a hotspot, he's got a hotspot, he's got a hotspot. I don't have one. I use my phone.
But you don't use clients' public network or anything like that?
We could, but I think you just use your judgment. If I'm at a client, like if I'm at the zoo, I might use their Wi-Fi. If I'm at Starbucks, I might be, like I said, I just showed you an access point that I created on my phone. Yep.
From a regulatory perspective, are there any laws or regulations that are in place to prevent these things from happening? Like the time limit on how long you can store credit card information?
The regulation, well, there's a couple of things. The regulations are around notifying if something happens, because you can't regulate what a company needs to do. So, for example, I think Mark was, or somebody mentioned, Jeff, you mentioned about changing passwords every 90 days.
Sure.
You can't mandate that. At Plant Moran, we have 15-character passwords, but you can't mandate that. So what the regulations do is they mandate if a breach were to occur, you have to notify. Now, there's other standards. So if you're processing credit cards, the credit card company will have you maintain a standard called PCI, which is a Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, and they have specific security configurations you have to verify that you do that you have a firewall, that you encrypt the data, that you delete it after X amount of days. So they are between regulations and standards. Same thing in the healthcare, there's the HIPAA standard. There's a high trust certification that organizations go through. Chris, you mentioned earlier passwords. Can we talk a little bit about good password?
Sure. Yeah, and it actually kind of goes back to his question in regards to, like, should I password protect my zip files and stuff. I mean, that's only going to be as secure as your password is. If to your point earlier, a lot of people pick really easy passwords that they can remember. So when you want a more complex password, I have a personal password manager that I use for all of my own things. It has a master password that is a very long string of characters that I have worked on memorizing over time. And of course, you have biometrics and things of that sort. But I think for an organization, utilizing different tools for the users can really help encourage them to pick better passwords and practice those best standards. Having a single sign-on solution. They log onto their Windows system and they can authenticate with Office 365 and Box for their files and internal applications and things of that sort. You can implement multi-factor authentication solutions where on their phone it'll pop up, with a 6-digit string that they enter in, and the application will basically cause that string to change every 60 seconds or so. And that's obviously a better solution, because if you crack my password, well, do you have my phone also? And are you able to authenticate into my multi-factor authentication to see what that code is and enter that string in? So it's no different than a pre-shared key, like you said, for wireless. We have to find different solutions for these, and that they're readily available. A lot of them are built into things that you already have. Radius authentication for your wireless can really increase securing your wireless network. So you don't have the same pre-shared key for the last 2 years, and all of your users that are no longer with the organization still remember that key. They could probably sit in your parking lot and connect to your network. But if you're utilizing radius authentication, they're going to have to use their Windows credentials. So the user gets disabled, so does their access to the network, and you can provision those on the fly as well. So I think there's a lot of great tools out there for password management. Marco talked about identity as a service. There's tools that combine single sign-on services with password managers, and they work with not only your cloud applications, but you can combine them with your internal ones as well.
Let's talk about good and bad behavior passwords. Let's talk about bad behavior. How often should we change passwords? What's a bad behavior?
Yeah.
Never? Okay, yeah. How many of you have never changed their internet banking passwords? Don't raise your hands, but just think about that. What else? Once a year, is that bad? Is that good? Yes?
If you have a good password, isn't keeping it better than keep changing it? I don't know.
No, but I was more or less looking at bad behavior. So what you're saying is the longer your password, the less frequently you need to change it, which is very true. At Plant Moran, we have 15-character passwords, and we don't change them that frequently. So that is a good point you're making. Yep.
Somebody told me to use a sentence rather than a word.
True, but how many of you have more than 8-character passwords? It's quite a handful. For your Facebook account, too? I'm saying good. But again, that's the key is when we look at what we're doing, it's we have bad behavior in passwords. We don't change them that often. When they're not long enough, they're easy to remember, and it's a bad behavior that causes it. So if you talk about the good behavior, long passwords, right? How long? Too long, now someone's writing it down. Too short, it's easy for a hacker to guess or somebody else to guess. And I think it depends also what system you're accessing. Like, for example, if I'm accessing something maybe once a year, because I need to log in and pay my annual dues, I'll just create a password and then forget it. And then every year I need to access, I'll just say reset my password and ask me questions, and I reset it. But other things that I'm logging in, like my Facebook account is not the same as my bank account, which is not the same as my Plant Moran account. Somebody mentioned about using a phrase. I don't know, Chris or Jeff or Mark, if you want to talk about.
We have, as we rolled out some policies downtown, we did talk about creating complex passwords. If it's something that you can remember, sometimes they use like a anagram, or just the first character of a phrase, make a long phrase, and allows you to remember what they are. So mnemonics, something that you can remember, instead of just using the name of your kids, like my kid's name is, or kids' names are Jerry, Bob, Lou, and you take the first character of each one and make a password that way. There's creative ways to do it, but you want to make sure you're including, characters, unique numbers, things like that to mix it up a little bit. So it's complex and not something people can guess.
It's tough too, though, because different applications require a certain minimum number, and they require alphanumeric, capitalized characters. Certain characters are acceptable, some are not. And you think about how many different applications we use in our lives. It's probably a dozen or so, if not more, depending on how active you are out there in social media, et cetera. But we also use LastPass, something that we is a common core password that you remember, and then you can type in a 20-character password, and LastPass will remember that for you. And so that's something that we use. And I'm not sure from a consultant perspective how good or bad something like that is for someone to use, but that's something that we use. Not throughout all of the zoo, but certain of us do use LastPass.
At our diocese, another thing we did was, and we talked about identity management tools. I mean, one of the nice things about those is you can centralize all your applications, so that anywhere you're accessing externally, you have IT manage it. You can put very complex passwords on them, store it into the identity management tool, and then anyone accessing those tools they don't even know the password, because they're single signing on with their main ID, and then the sign on to the individual applications it's stored in a secure location with the identity management tool. So, whether it's Azure, Okta is a big popular one we're using at the Archdiocese, and it's allowed us to really manage the access of these applications centrally, so they're not reliant on every single person maintaining their own IDs.
And something that Jeff brought up in regards to LastPass, I use it personally, and I find it works well for personal use. From a business standpoint, we want to be able to provision and as well as revoke access to things. And so utilizing different identity as a service products, such as like Okta or something like that, you can basically manage it all from Active Directory, and you create your user, you put them in a group, and it'll create that account for them, and then you can assign them applications and passwords that you want to, and then as soon as you don't want them to have that anymore, you can remove that access. I do believe with LastPass you can share now, which is kind of in line with that, where you can revoke the access if you wanted to share it, if you had shared it out previously. But I think those are good tools for managing your environment and who has access to what.
And let me share a couple things around the science of passwords. So one is why the size of the password, right? So when you create a password, the password is stored in a hash. So I'm not going to be able to read your a hash. But in the system, if it's 7 characters, it's stored in 1 hash. And so when we're hacking your system, if it is just 1 hash we have to break, within 24 hours, we'll break an alphanumeric password that's less than 7 or less characters, because we have the tools and the software to do it. The moment you add the 8th character, now it's 2 hashes. So it makes it a little bit difficult for us. If you have a simple password that's 8 characters or more, but less than 14, it might take us a week to crack it, but we'll crack it with the software and the tools that we have. Now, we have more supercomputers we've built for it, so we have a rig that has 12 circuit boards, and that's the processing power that he has. But now if you go to 15-character passwords, it's very difficult for us to break that. It'll take us months to do it, because now you're going to 3 hashes. So that's the science behind the length. And so anytime you're setting a password, you got to decide how sensitive the data. You could have a 5-character, that's fine. As long maybe it's a website you go to read some news somewhere, and that's okay. So think about that. Now, the complexity, why do you put in alphanumerics? If you just had letters, the tools will crack it a lot faster, because it's got a different dictionary of words. And if you add numbers, it takes a little bit longer, because now we've got to go to phase 2 of trying to crack the passwords. Why don't you share passwords among different systems? So if your Amazon password, Amazon gets hacked, and it's the same password as your Facebook password, now that password, somebody could go use it, because one, your user ID is also the same that's on Amazon, that's on Facebook. And again, don't answer that question, but think about it for yourself. And so it's easy now to, okay, the user ID and the password, and it's not an individual manually doing it, it's software doing it. So one thing you could do is, your Amazon user ID might have a different word in it. It could be your name with Amazon, and then your Facebook might have. So now you have a different user ID, but it could be your name number 2 Amazon, for example. Your name number 2 Facebook, but somehow you're changing. And then the password, you can change it a little bit too, by adding little nuances to it. So your 10-character password could have 8 characters similar, but the 2 other ones are different for the different areas. So that's the reason with not sharing the passwords, is because if one's compromised, it's out on you've heard the word dark web, and it's just a fancy word for, think about it as a dark alley. You don't want, Bad stuff happens in the dark alley, bad stuff happens in the dark web, where the passwords are out there for hackers to use. So that maybe helps you with the science of passwords. Why do you change them that often? Because if your password got compromised or sitting in the dark web, somebody could use it. The moment you change it, you're fine because that password is useless. I have monitoring. It told me back in 2012, one of my passwords was in the dark web, but I'm not worried because it's changed since then. So that's the reason behind the complexity, the length, how frequently you change. So if there's a major breach like Target, you want to go and change your passwords. Why take the risk that you might be in the database or not? Yes?
What about forcing the user to use a special character in their password, an @ sign or something? How does that change the complexity and how the difficulty in order to crack it?
Significantly. I mean, Adam, you do this all day. So somebody adds, I mean, it changes the timeline. You might not even be able to crack it, right?
So using an @ sign for an A or something like that.
Both the length and the complexity, as far as uppercase, lowercase, special characters, and numbers, they all add to the overall strength of the password as a whole.
Raj, what if your data is compromised? Now what are you supposed to do? Especially for small non-profit organizations, should they call the police?
No, actually the police or the FBI wouldn't do much for you other than record your incident, unless if it's a bigger incident. But I would say first thing obviously you want to do is don't touch your systems. You know, we get clients that will right away start touching the system. Secondly, you have to have legal involvement. You know, getting the experts, whoever's managing your infrastructure or forensic expert in. Don't use the word breach. Because if you have an insurance policy, the cyber insurance policy says you have 90 days to notify from when you knew about a breach. So if they see an email from you saying, hey, we got a breach, but it really wasn't a breach, that your clock starts ticking from there. Or from a regulation standpoint, it might say you knew about a breach. So you can say we might have an incident, we might have an issue we need to look into, but only use the word breach once you know you truly have a breach. I'm going to open it up with questions. We've got about 10 minutes, and then I'm going to have Adam do their demo. You want to set up while we open it for questions?
You mentioned the dark web and your password being found on that. Experian had a similar breach as Target did, and then now there's advertising on the television commercials about going to Experian to find out if you're in the dark web. I wouldn't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole, but is there a way to check in dark web without compromising yourself?
So the only thing with the dark web is it only tells you if there's a known issue, and a lot of time they don't know about it. The only time they know is there was a breach and they got notified, then they'll tell you, oh yeah, you did shop at Target, so you're in this database. But they're not truly going in the dark web, and because if we had that kind of technology, we would go delete that right away. Yeah, my thing is, experience hack, go change your passwords. Then even if it's out there, it's a non-issue.
Another question I have, Raj. How come most of these attacks come from Russia?
Actually, they don't all come from Russia, but so the attacks have moved more to, I would say, cybercrime now. So these are organized groups, and so what's happened is they've realized you can make more money with cybercrime than prostitution or drugs, and you can face less jail time. You can do this and go to 2 to 3 years, and maybe you never get caught. When the drugs and stuff, it's a lot more. So if you look at a major breach, what they do is they breach they hire hackers, they breach the database, and they create cards, even from a room key, and then they use their local network that's already set up to go cash out from these fake cards. So it is organized crime, and whether it's Russia or Eastern Europe or wherever, it could be South America, we sometimes don't really know the true source of what it is. But it's organized crime. Brian?
Hey, Raj, so I got a quick question. So for the gentleman or for yourself, so as an auditor, I guess my question would be, from what I've seen, how do you protect yourself as an organization from the IT director? So I've had 2 instances where the IT director has left the organization, and the worry has been they've left clues to get back into the system once they've left. So are there simple ways they could do, because if you call the software, they're also the main contact for the software dealers, or changing the passwords, or are there simple things people can do to protect themselves basically from their own IT director?
So we say, how do we protect from Marcos?
Yeah.
Right? Anyone?
I can tell you, I'm really big in I make sure that there's someone beside me that has access to all the systems. So at least 2 people that are responsible for that. That way, if one leaves, you know, the other one can handle password changes and things like that to make sure the other person's turned off. Then you got to find a replacement for that person. But you know, the challenge is you got to make sure someone else has got the codes. And the other piece is the whole identity management platform. The more we centralize it and have, you know, a single master password, we have a password safe, that we have a master password that we make sure the 2 of us that have access are always recording if there's a change or if there's a new password we have to track, gets in that safe. And the safe is, we actually have the safe, which is encrypted on a shared drive, or actually a Dropbox, that then, you know, we can get to it where we need to. But it's, you know, the 2 of us have the password, and we have another step in the process which we're working on, is making sure we get that on a piece of paper in a safe deposit box for the archdiocese, so they have it as well, you know, in case of something even more serious. But you want to make sure you have those controls, and somebody that's, you know, has a master password to get to the other passwords.
Just to go along with that, I'm director of IT at a college, but it's a real small college, so I'm.
You're hurt by the comment? Are you hurt by that comment?
Well, yeah, I'm not hurt by it, no. But transparency in that department is important. So for the vice president of administration, what I do is I have one set of systems that has all the passwords in it. It's an encrypted database that she also has access to, and that's kept up on a regular basis. So at any point in time, she has access to any of the information and passwords and everything that I have access to. I also have because small, each different department, it might be like financial has its own set of systems and passwords, and the library systems has its own set of passwords, and I have people in those departments have access to everything in that department. One person has access. So there's a structure in place to make sure that I'm not the only person that has access to everything. Right. And then the third thing would be when you call somebody like this gentleman right there, an outside company, that if you feel you're uncomfortable, if there's any reason that the second person could get in, you'd get a hold of somebody else, outside person that could get into the servers and take a good look around, make sure there's no back doors set up inside the firewall, because there's nothing set up there.
Actually, I would do the third thing first, because I think Paul's question presupposes that the IT director has gone rogue and maybe hasn't shared all the passwords with everyone internally, and so we're talking about a bad apple that we're trying to mitigate damage to the organization. So I'd go outside immediately and bring in a consultant to help us understand where we are and where we need to plug the potential weak spots, so that that person can't continue to sort of have access to information in our systems.
And so, so we've been brought in at times by clients when somebody leaves, and again, it doesn't have to be rogue. It could be somebody forgot all the different things you have set up. By the way, over 50% of the cyber incidents, not that are professional related, are insider, and over half of them are unintentional too, by the way. But what we would do is we would make sure that we're there before the person leaves. We'd reset all the admin passwords, force a reset. We would make sure we review all the user IDs and validate that against an employee. And anything that's not attached to an employee, we'll figure out whose ID that is. You also can have the IT person sign off that they're not going to log in after they leave. So there's certain ways with your HR department you can, if you're worried about the individual. But the other thing you want to do is the 30 days, 60 days after that, you want to review your logs to see if this person is, or certain IDs are logging in that shouldn't. Because if the person has access, they will log in. If they want to log in, you'll see it. It's after hours, it came from an IP address you didn't know. So it's important to monitor. No different than a controller leaving your organization that have access to your internet banking account. You know, that's something, again, you want to change that right away, and there needs to be that handoff also. Yes?
Yeah, I wanted to go back to the storage of passwords for our own needs. On my phone, I see iPassword as an app. I've never used it. I think it came as a part of the Apple phone, probably. But it seems like if you put all of your passwords in one of these apps, all someone has to do is break into your app and they've got everything. And I'm wondering, are there some apps that are better than others? And, you know, how does it would seem like that's where you'd want to go if you were trying to get someone's passwords.
Chris, you want to?
Yeah, there are certain products, obviously, you're going to have to compare and review those. However, I think where we're at today, I don't think a password is sufficient for things that are very important to you. You know, if you have a database of all of your passwords, you're going to want to secure that in a couple different ways. And so I personally would implement multi-factor authentication. I probably have about 5 or 6 apps on my phone where it allows me to set it up with an authenticator, and it's that concept of having a token as well. A lot of times you can combine it with biometrics and things of that sort. Something that I would definitely avoid on that topic of managing passwords is don't save them in your browsers. It's not a good practice. It's not a good password manager, and a lot of times, you know, it's not uncommon for someone to forget to lock their computer, and somebody could walk up and log into your bank account because you have it automatically saved. So there are, obviously, you bring up a good point of if LastPass were to get hacked, you know, what would they be able to have? But all that data is encrypted as well, and it would take a very long time to decrypt it. And then hopefully by the time they were able to do so, you would change those passwords.
Right. So think about some of those tools. Like, I don't personally use them, but for most of you in the room, that might be a better way to protect your password than to writing it down or whatever other method you have to remember your password. If you want a strong password, how are you going to remember it? You got 20 different passwords. That might be a tool that could help you securely because it's better. Now, if you can remember and stuff, that's awesome. I'm going to make one last comment, and then we're going to go to the hacking demo. Paul mentioned about your IT person, but most of you, how many of you have older parents or family members? When they pass away, how do you access their accounts? And if I wrote a blog in Cranes about that, is what to do, and so I might encourage you at least to look at that, because that's something that we're going to face sooner or later, is how do we access our parents' email accounts, Facebook accounts, bank accounts, because they will not release it to you. So let's go to the demo. I might have the panelists kind of move off stage before I come crashing down on them.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Adam Cohen. I'm a senior cybersecurity consultant with Plant Moran's cybersecurity team. Been with the firm for a little over 4 years now, working primarily in the attack and pen space. Essentially, we provide ethical hacking and penetration testing services to our clients, working primarily with financial institutions, community banks, credit unions, but we've also worked in several other areas and industries, higher education, not-for-profit, so on and so forth. Today, I think we're just going to show you a quick little hacking demonstration of something that could potentially happen on a hypothetical internal network. So say if you're, at home, if you're in the office, if you're connected to open Wi-Fi in a Starbucks or somewhere, this is just an example of someone who's out there doing malicious activity, something that they could potentially be performing. So for this demonstration, we're going to do what is known as a man-in-the-middle attack. So essentially, if you think about communication on a network between 2 points, imagine point A is your workstation, your laptop, your computer, and point B would be a service or an application that you're reaching out to, whether it be a file share or maybe you're trying to access the internet through a web browser, things of that nature. Your computer is going to be attempting to authenticate to these different services from point A to point B. The hacker or the attacker, if he's on the network, he's going to try to intercept or put himself in the middle of that communication. So this guy in the middle here with the hat and the glasses, he is the man in the middle, he is the hacker. And for the purposes of this demonstration, you can just imagine that is me. I left the hat and the glasses at home because this is my formal hacking attire, so. That is correct, yeah. So for this demonstration, we have 2 virtual machine computers set up here. Our first virtual machine, this is going to be our hacker or our attacker computer. It's running an operating system known as Kali Linux. This is a penetration testing operating system that we utilize for our security assessments. It's free and it's openly available on the internet, so you can go ahead and Google it and play around with it. And it's preloaded with different hacking tools that a lot of penetration testers and ethical hackers utilize, as I mentioned, for our security audits. Our second virtual machine over here is just going to be like our victim machine. It's a Windows 7 workstation or virtual machine. So on our hacker machine, we're utilizing a tool known as Responder, and this is going to be the man-in-the-middle tool. It's essentially going to spoof these different systems or services on the network in an attempt to get our victim machine to try to authenticate to the hacker machine or the attacker machine. So we're going to go ahead and kick up our Responder tool here, and it's going to show all these different services that it's essentially emulating on the internal network. So over here on our victim computer, we're going to go ahead and log in. And as I mentioned, this the victim computer, you can pretend like this is you at the office, or you're surfing the web at a Starbucks connected to free Wi-Fi, something of that nature. So we're just going to open up a couple of different things here on our victim computer. Basically, we're just going to try to generate some traffic or some activity on the computer here. So we're going to open up our network, see if we got any maybe file shares that we're going to try to access. Open up our web browser here. Maybe you're at work and you're Googling pictures of cats. I don't know, that's typically what I end up doing most of the day. Just a little bit of a web activity here. Some pictures of dogs too, just to balance things out a little bit. If we go back to our hacker machine though, we can see that the traffic that's been generated by our victim, it's showing these are all the authentication requests that our victim machine was basically generating when we reached out to those different services, when we opened our web browser, when we opened up looking for file shares. You can see from the victim's perspective, there were no prompts, no security prompts. It all seems completely seamless because the hacker or the attacker, he's just taking that information, keeping it for himself, and then passing it along to the legitimate source. So as you can see here, we were successful in intercepting the victim's credentials in the form of a password hash. Now, as Raj kind of touched on previously, a password hash is a masked version of your password. So this jumbled looking block of letters and numbers, from the hacker's perspective, we're not able to actually utilize this as to authenticate to any systems or gain access to that user's account. what we first must do is take this hash and input it into a password cracking tool in an attempt to recover the password in plain text. So we're going to go ahead and boot up our password cracking tool. And as you can see here, just a quick little screenshot to show you. We've taken our password hash here, which, as I mentioned, is just a string of letters and numbers. It's a masked version of the hash, and we're going to input it into our password cracking tool, which Raj also touched on previously. The tool is connected to 6 different GPUs, or graphics processing units, which are essentially capable of just performing multiple iterations of guesses as far as trying to crack the password, to recover the password. The thing that's interesting about password cracking is that we're not actually attempting to crack, so to speak, the password or the hash that we recovered, but more so we're trying to recreate it by guessing different variations of the password, passing it through the hashing algorithm used in this case by Microsoft, in order to see if we can recreate the hash. Once we have a successful guess as far as what the password might be, and we recreate that hash, if we match the 2 hashes, we know that we've successfully recovered the password in plain text. So this operation right here is basically just inputting the password hash into the tool and a couple of different flags that are telling the tool how to operate, and we're just going to go ahead and kick this off. The interesting thing about password cracking and this tool is that it's being run completely offline. It's removed from the network that we previously intercepted the password hash from. So really, it's only a matter of seconds or minutes that the hacker or the attacker would need to be on your network in order to intercept your password hash. Once they have that hash and have captured it, they can take it offline and they can perform password cracking attempts against it. And basically they have unlimited time and resources. As we kind of touched on earlier, the overall strength of the password is only so strong as, you know, how long the password is, how often are you changing the password. If the password gets compromised, ideally your organization's policy would require that, you know, you've changed that password, whether it be every 60 days, 90 days, so on and so forth. And now, as we can see here, while I was going over that, we were able to successfully recover the password. I can kind of zoom in here for you. So this part right here just basically says we were successful in recovering 1 out of the 1 hashes that we input into our password cracking tool. So if we go back here, we can show the hash here with the password cracked. And as you can see at the end of this password hash, this last bit here is the password that we successfully recovered, my password 123. So obviously not the most secure password, but for demonstration purposes, it proves our point. And certainly if you happen to be using this password, I would recommend changing it. But that's it for our password cracking and man-in-the-middle demonstration. I think as we can see here, it's kind of just demystified, you know, the world of hacking and penetration testing. You know, through the use of these tools and these techniques, certainly Plant Moran's cybersecurity team, we emulate, you know, hackers or attackers and give our clients kind of the hacker's viewpoint or look into your network so that they can better protect and secure themselves in the events that someone out there with malicious intent would try to perform similar activities. And if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Yep. So we'll take, I think while the time's up, so we will be here and you can come up and ask questions. But that was a live hack. He was going right back to our tools and getting the answer back. I will tell you though, when we crack and when we go and do these tests of our clients, you can tell the tempo, the temperature of the client, because if everyone's unhappy, you'll see the passwords are a little pissy. And if somebody likes somebody in a different department, you will start seeing those signs of who likes who and who hates who and who is unhappy and who is chirpy. And so that's another reason you want to do the pen test, is to see how the employees are doing. So again, I thank the three panelists, and then they're waiting at the back. And if you have questions for me or Adam, I got Scott here too, and Zach, we can answer any questions. John?
So Raj, thanks. Everybody, thanks for coming today. We are already starting to plan for next year's series of seminars, so keep an eye out for that. And again, we appreciate your attendance here. If you do have any thoughts or ideas on topics you'd like to hear, very open to those. So feel free to catch me after the session here, and I could get those from you. So again, thanks very much. Our panelists are over here on the right-hand side.